In 1972, a young family moved into the French village of Boutier. This family was made up of the then 31-year-old Jacques Méchinaud, a man originally from Beau-Charent, his 29-year-old wife, Pierrette, and their two sons, Eric, who was 7, and Bruno, who was 4. They moved to the small village when Jacques got a job as a maintenance worker at the nearby glass factory of Saint-Gobain, where he fixed and worked on the machines in the factory and was able to earn enough so that Pierrette could stay home and focus on raising the children. Jacques was known to be a bit quiet and reserved, and even a bit touchy at times, but he was also known for being an incredibly hard worker and a gifted mechanic. He was considered to be a model employee at the glass factory, and even did extra work in the evenings and on the weekends, where he fixed cars and tractors for other locals and neighbours to help earn some extra money for him and his family. The Méchinauds had only been living in the village for a few months, towards the end of 1972, so they hadn't had much time to make any friends in the area, but they did have people that they could go and visit locally to help celebrate Christmas that year. On Sunday the 24th of December, the Méchinauds piled into the family car and drove about 4 kilometres away to the nearby town of Cognac to spend time with the Fontanillas. The Fontanillas were friends of the family, and by all accounts, everyone was in a festive mood that night. The Méchinauds had been out just the day before to buy some toys for the boys, and everyone seemed to be in good spirits when they arrived at the Fontanillas that evening, with big plans to eat a réveillon together. This is a dinner traditionally eaten at midnight on Christmas Eve and used to signify the official start of the Christmas celebrations, so it wasn't unusual that the party that night went on a bit late. Things ended up wrapping up at around 1 a.m. when Jacques went outside to start the car and warm it up before the rest of the family got back in it. When they all piled into the car, everyone saw that a thick fog had settled throughout the town of Cognac, and the Fontanillas were a little concerned about sending the Méchinauds out into it. Visibility had dropped to just 3 to 5 metres, but at the end of the day, the Méchinauds had only about a 10-minute drive ahead of them, and Jacques hadn't been drinking that evening. There didn't seem to be any reason why he couldn't just take his time and drive slowly and safely, so the Méchinauds all climbed into the car and the Fontanillas waved them off. But the very next day, the family didn't show up for Christmas dinner at Jacques' family home, and his father tried to report them as missing to the police. This sounded pretty straightforward, but in accordance to French law, the Méchinauds couldn't be considered as missing just yet. They were still considered to be within their rights to, quote, disappear, and the fact that they hadn't stuck to their original plan of going over to Jacques' family was thought to be them exercising that right rather than them being missing. As surprising as this may sound to some of us now, France still has very strict laws regarding people's rights to be where they want to be, and only being in contact with the people that they want to be in contact with, but that only goes for adults. 2 of the Méchinauds, Eric and Bruno, were still children, and their disappearances would have been handled quite differently if Jacques' family had been able to prove that they were actually missing. But how could they do that when it was the middle of the holiday season and they had no way to reach out to them? School was out until the new year, so the children couldn't be reported as missing from school, and none of the neighbours thought that anything unusual was going on at the household when the family didn't show up for a few days. It was the holiday season, and people visit family during the holidays, so how could the neighbours have known when the Méchinauds were expected to be coming and going? The Méchinauds appeared to have slipped through the cracks, and it was only on the 6th of January when Pierrette's father also reached out to the police to say that he hadn't heard from his daughter or her children, that the police decided to go over to the house, but almost as soon as they entered, they realised that something wasn't quite right. The toys that the Méchinauds had bought on the 23rd of December were still out in the living room, and the presents for the family were still under the tree, still wrapped and unopened. In the fridge, investigators found the turkey and oysters untouched and ready for Christmas Day, and they found no signs that the family had actually ever come home from the dinner party on the 24th. All the family documents remained in the house, as well as all of their clothing, and there was no activity on any of their bank accounts. By the 10th of January, when there was still no sign of the family and no one had heard from them, the police took the disappearance a lot more seriously. They had a helicopter up in the air hoping to spot the family car, but that, in and of itself, was a big deal for the village of Boutier. This was the first time that many of the people living there had actually even seen a helicopter, and it was seeing it searching for the Méchinauds that solidified the fact that they were actually missing to the rest of the villagers. Then people took to the streets, trying to help in the search, and divers began going into local rivers, ponds and creeks, but it was the middle of winter and it was difficult for the divers to stay in the water for long. This made the search of the waters slow and tricky, but when the surrounding area had finally been fully searched, no trace of the family or the car had been found, not even tyre tracks to give any clues as to which direction the family could have gone in. Left without answers, and people did what people do best and started coming up with their own theories about what had happened to the family. The next thing anyone knew, rumours about why this had happened and how a whole family could just disappear began spreading through the village, and so many of these rumours included the theory of an affair. Some said Pierrette was bored with being a housewife and tired of her cantankerous husband, so she'd secretly started having an affair with another man in the village to help occupy her time. Another rumour suggested that Jacques had found out about Pierrette's lover. Some versions said that Jacques had only recently learned about the affair. Some versions said that he told his brother as far back as May, and that there had been problems in his marriage, and that if Pierrette ever tried to leave him, he'd, quote, make everyone disappear. The latter version of the rumours are, however, a bit harder to believe, especially as it began circulating only after the family had disappeared and had been gone for a while, and Jacques' brother later came out to clarify that his brother had said, quote, if it doesn't work out, I will leave and you will never find me, when talking about the problems that he and Pierrette had been having in their marriage. But that did not stop the rumour mill from churning. There were rumours that Jacques had tried to kill Pierrette after he'd found out about the affair, and she'd been seen around the neighbourhood with a black eye and strangulation marks around her neck just days before the whole family had disappeared. But the Fontanillas said they hadn't seen any such marks on Pierrette, and that the Méchinauds had seemed perfectly happy during the party on the evening of the 24th. With no facts to get in the way, the rumours kept spreading, and they were about the only things that kept developing in the case. The investigation, just like the Méchinauds' trail, went cold, and this could have been where the story ended. But in 2011, Jacques' family ran into an unexpected problem. His siblings wanted to sell a piece of land that they'd inherited, but because Jacques was still considered as missing and had never been officially declared as deceased, his family hit a roadblock in the transaction. His brother, Jean-Paul Méchinaud, reached out to the courts to try to reach a conclusion so the sale could go ahead, and prosecutor Nicolas Jacquet not only granted permission for the family to sell the land without Jacques' approval, but he also ordered for the Méchinaud case to be reopened and reinvestigated. Over 46 years after the family had disappeared, investigators were back on the scene trying to use the latest technology to find out what had happened to them, and the investigation started with some of the more obvious places. Search parties combed the waters again, looking for the car that Jacques had been driving that night, thinking that the fog had caused him to accidentally crash into the water and the family had drowned. The common theory was that the car had gone over a bridge that was on the route from the Fontanillas' house to the Méchinauds, but no one had reported any damage to the bridge that would have indicated that a car had gone through the barriers along the side of it. And, to everyone's surprise, the latest and greatest technology uncovered nothing in the waters in and around the village of Boutier. This gave some of the people following this case newfound confidence that Jacques had something to do with the family disappearing and had maybe killed his family and fled the country. But Robert Richard, the man who'd been the mayor of Boutier at the time that the family had disappeared, has his own theories. He said in a later interview with the press, quote, "I would love to imagine that they have escaped abroad and that everything is fine with them. But I believe, alas, that they died a long time ago, probably a few hours after their disappearance. And this, I believe, for several simple reasons. First, leaving France was not as easy as it is today, especially with young children and no financial resources. And especially because if they were alive, one of them would necessarily have appeared. Eric, or Bruno at least, would probably have sought to see their family who live not far from here. The truth would come out. An accident seems just as improbable to me. Even admitting that they skidded and fell into the water, we would have found tyre tracks, then probably the car. Each time a manager is transferred to the gendarmerie, he tried to revive the affair, imagining himself as Hercule Poirot or Sherlock Holmes of modern times. Imagine the spotlight if this crime was solved, but in the absence of new information, most investigators end up throwing in the towel. Beyond anniversaries, we talk about it again when a roughly comparable incident occurs, such as at the time of the Godard or Dupont de Ligonnès affairs. But each time we are forced to note that there are traces of the missing, that these people are unfortunately dead most of the time. This is the big difference with the Méchinauds, for whom we don't have the smallest beginning of clues. And that is where the case remains today. Somehow a family got into their car and disappeared without a trace, leaving investigators and their families to try to piece together this mystery for over half a century with basically no information to work with, and dwindling hope that any members of the family will be found, either dead or alive.